Hey, how you doing? My name's Ryan, and today I'm going over my personal ranking for all of the Marvel Studios content in 2021. This year has been crazy for the MCU, especially given the break we had in 2020. It really felt like opening up the floodgates with 5 TV shows and 4 feature films to enjoy. But did I enjoy all of it? And what did I enjoy the most? This is my personal ranking going from worst to best. Now, if your list differs wildly from mine, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and blanket spoiler warning for all things MCU in 2021. With that, let's start off with my least favorite show, What If? I'll start with the pros. The animation style was rather nice, and when the voice acting worked, it really worked well. Jeffrey Wright, Chris Hemsworth, Michael B. Jordan, and Chadwick Boseman really do a solid job. I liked the episodes that leaned into a specific genre or theme, like the Twilight Zone-esque Doctor Strange episode, the high school comedy with Party Thor, and the murder mystery with Hank Pym. But there were a lot of things that really hampered What If, especially the main conceit of the show. It couldn't decide if it wanted to be an anthology series, self-contained, or a sprawling multiverse team-up. I say that even though there was literally a multiverse team-up. The build-up to the Guardians of the Multiverse really felt like it came from a studio note after watching the first few episodes, and not the intention from the start. I think there was no real right answer here, as a straight-up anthology would have made some people call the show superfluous, while a meticulously plotted long-form arc would have ticked off fans of the original What If premise. And for me, I think the half measure we ended up with was really the worst option, as it didn't commit to either side. The pacing, as a lot of people already mentioned, is relentless, as the stories being told don't feel like they can fit into 30 minutes. Some episodes, like Marvel Zombies and Killmonger, just stop. Not end, stop. My wife and I watched What If every Wednesday when it came out, and after each episode we just felt either underwhelmed or whelmed. What If is easily my least favorite bit of content from the MCU in 2021. Up next is Black Widow. The pros: Florence Pugh is an instantly charismatic and dynamic actress. I love the movie Midsommar, and it took me almost half a Black Widow to remember she's the same actress as the horror movie's leading lady. The rest of the main cast, Johansson, Harbour, and Weiss, do a good job fleshing out the forced family dynamic. Taskmaster's introduction was pretty incredible, as was the opening title sequence. But all that being said, I'm not sure this was the return to Marvel movies a lot of us were clamoring for. The phrase, "worth the wait," is something a lot of film studios used to promote their ever-delaying film slates, and Black Widow didn't quite have the goods to make it in a stacked 2021. But what's more frustrating is that the film feels more like a mid-2010 action movie rather than a 2021, in both pacing and payoff. That wonderful intro sequence is after a 10-minute cold open scene, and there are long parts of the film that feel more like a checklist than a dynamic story. And Taskmaster, while a fine concept on paper, a dark reflection of Natasha's dirty past, it fails to deliver a character that you can sympathize with. By the time you know who's behind the mask, you realize she's brainwashed and instantly wiped of any agency. She's just another drone. Heck, I think the helmet did more work than the actual character did. The reveal that the Widow family planned to get captured is sloppy and feels more like a gotcha to the audience than a thought-out twist. And the rest of the action is high quality technically, but forgettable after one watch. While it was great to see the Marvel Studios logo in front of a film, I wish the film after it was a little bit better. Next on my list is Eternals. The pros: Eternals breathed some fantastic new life into Marvel Cosmic, which to this point has been dominated by the popular Guardians-esque anarchy and humor. The Celestials literally bring order and a religious dogma to the scene, and when it works, it's stunning, thought-provoking, and puts a giant smile on my face. The acting and casting is stellar as well. Richard Madden as Icarus is desperate to keep his belief system intact at whatever cost. Kumail Nanjiani's Kingo encompasses the best of Marvel's quippiness. Lauren Ridloff as Makari and Barry Keoghan as Druig are instantly lovable and bring such a charm to their dynamic. For me, the setup for this film is pretty close to perfect, but the payoff is When the theological divisions arise within the Eternals, the Deviants lose all purpose as antagonists. The film knows this and almost forgets to add them in the climax. I'm almost certain the quote-unquote evolving deviant isn't even named, despite being the red herring villain in the trailers. Kingo is also oddly absent in the final act, and not like he doesn't do much, he's straight up not there. Sprite's affection for Icarus feels kind of half-baked, as she's acted like a child for most of the film, despite her arc being centered around the curse of only the appearance of a child. Cersei really isn't much of a character outside of being just a good person. She's not really troubled, not really challenged, and not really interesting. Around the halfway point, I was really digging the film, but when I left the theaters, I felt more excited for Star Fox and Pip the Troll than I did the characters I just spent 2.5 hours with. So Eternals ranks pretty low for me. Next up is Falcon and the Winter Soldier. The pros? This is an MCU buddy cop series to the full degree, but the Falcon and Winter Soldier also brings some of the most emotional gut punches to Disney Plus so far. Bucky's deprogramming, the memorial to Isaiah, Walker straight up decapitating someone with the shield. These moments stick with you and help weave a really fascinating and impactful story. Themes of racial injustice, legacy, terrorism, it all works and works darn well. The cast clearly brought their A-game to Falcon Winter Soldier, especially Wyatt Russell. The brotherly love and hate between Sebastian Stan and Anthony Mackie is heartwarming, hilarious, but most of all, believable. Zemo makes a more comedic return to the MCU, trying to play all sides of the conflict to ensure his agenda is successful, and it makes for a really great dynamic. The action of the Falcon Winter Soldier also brought to fruition the promise of movie-quality TV to Disney+, as the first episode air battle, ending brawl, and just about every other punch-out was well choreographed, well shot, and well edited. There's just one thing that really stood out to me as being bad, and I don't mean just villainous either. The Flag Smashers felt like an afterthought than a true antagonist, and Carly definitely ranks low on the MCU villain tier. Acting-wise, Aaron Kellyman did fine, but writing-wise, Carly is too cruel to be redeemable or misunderstood, and too serious and straight-laced to be enjoyable as a villain. That's a real shame because her lack of charisma or impact as an antagonist almost diminishes the heroics of the Falcon. It's more than just a story issue. The Flag Smashers lessen the impact of the title characters and leaves the Falcon's big heroic save becoming more frustrating than cheerworthy. Every time the Flag Smashers showed up, I almost heard my wife groan like, ugh, these guys again, and I can't help but feel the same way. They were really obnoxious and lowered the quality of an arguably great TV show without them. Next up on my ranking is WandaVision. The pros. The first Disney Plus Marvel show left a strong first impression for sure. People either love it or hate it, and I'm leaning more towards love. The production value of the show used its budget perfectly. The recreations of various eras of television are handled beautifully. From the sets, lighting, camera lenses, shot composition, special effects, it's all just spot on. What's more is the acting, especially from Elizabeth Olsen, makes the jump from decade to decade flawlessly. You feel like you're watching a sitcom starring Scarlet Witch and Vision, rather than a parody. Kathryn Hahn and Paul Bettany also bring their A-game as they try to unravel the story. WandaVision was the type of show I woke up early to watch and was giddy each week. It was easily the most enjoyable MCU Disney Plus experience this year. I was the most engaged, most vocal while watching, and the most eager every time a new episode came up. My wife and I literally shouted, "No, that's it!" every time the end credits showed up because we just wanted more. The problem was, the show really never gave us that more. Once Agatha finished her song, the show's mystery unraveled. Not really in an interesting way, but an incredibly predictable one. All the red herrings faded away, the obvious corporate military bad guy was an obvious corporate military bad guy, and the Disney-style villain, and I mean that in a good way, chewed the scenery until it was her turn to lose to Wanda in a big, spectacular battle. The alluring questions of what's happening and who's behind it all became answers that didn't really make me want to rewatch the series again. I really think WandaVision became the Lost of the MCU. The show knew exactly how to intrigue the viewers with clues and hints, but that's only because the creators knew the answers they had planned would be underwhelming at the very end. Wanda being forgiven by Monica is painful to watch, as it wipes her anti-heroics as just being misunderstood, defeating the purpose of the show setting her up as the literal harbinger of death and destruction, the Scarlet Witch. WandaVision knew exactly how to kick off the era of MCU television on Disney Plus with some TV meta-narrative and reality-bending antics, but it fell into some predictable plots and some predictable fights in the end. Next is Loki. This was my wife's favorite Marvel content of the year, as it really brought the viewer through the most winding story and arguably the biggest consequences for the MCU. Honestly, Loki flawlessly moves from a detective procedural to a man-on-the-run thriller to a cerebral drama about fate and determinism. Each subsequent evolution of the story is arguably more interesting than the previous, something that WandaVision sorely lacked. The visual style of the show is wonderful, from the eerie 1970s offices of the TVA, to the post-apocalyptic wasteland, to the castle at the end of time. Tom Hiddleston's Loki does a quasi-speed run of his character arc, but then takes his character to a new level of self-reflection. Owen Wilson feels oddly at home as Mobius, and I'm just waiting for the next appearance of Jonathan Majors' King the Conqueror. That dude showed some serious range, and I am so excited to have a villain that can hop between being fun and dynamic and kooky to downright threatening and subtle. Also, Natalie Holt's score is just perfect, easily the best Marvel music of the year. My only complaint here is that some of the character motivations are a little bit flimsy, specifically Judge Renslayer. I don't think she knows if she wants to be evil, bureaucratic, zealous, or impartial. Each episode she's handled well, but looking back at the whole series, her drive seems to change almost on a whim. But overall, Loki is a fantastic show, and I'm really excited we already have confirmation for a season 2. Up next on my list, and my favorite Marvel Disney Plus show this year, Hawkeye. This is a loving adaptation and homage to the famed Matt Fraction run. Hawkeye gives the Archer a real chance to shine in his own element. Jeremy Renner's resting face of reluctance is perfect for the show. Hawkeye is just trying to keep everything together and get home for Christmas, a goal so relatable and simple you can't help but root for him. Kate Bishop is handled really well here too. She's youthful, exuberant, but not annoying. She shoots off her mouth from time to time, but she's still very likable. The action's really fun, but kind of sparse, with the brawl in the abandoned toy store being a real highlight. The series is mostly character heavy and balances it all really well. Each new element, whether Yelena, Echo, or Kingpin, fits into the narrative rather well and elevates everything around it. Hawkeye as a series feels like the first 6-hour MCU movie rather than a 6-part miniseries. Each episode doesn't have a 3-act structure like, say, Falcon Winter Soldier, nor does the story really change all that much like Loki. Perhaps this show benefits most from a longer runtime, but the pacing is really solid, especially when it slows down and focuses on the impact years of avenging has on Clint's already aging body. That scene where he talks to his son on the phone without really being able to hear him is wonderfully acted and honestly kind of gut-wrenching. The reintroduction of Kingpin was a delight, but even if you weren't tied to the Netflix series, seeing this big, almost indestructible mob boss felt like seeing Kang in Loki. Both shows really telegraph, hey, get used to these two, you're gonna see a lot of them, and that makes me so happy. My only complaint was the questionable handling of the murder mystery plotline. The pilot episode hooks you with this who killed Armand, and then spends 4 episodes shouting at you, is it Jack? Maybe it's Jack! As red herrings go, it's a little forced, and there wasn't ever a time I really believed it was Jack. I always figured it was the mother, and by the finale, it's almost like the show knows that you know, and just has Eleanor admit it in passing. Hawkeye as a series has several plots to set up and pay off, so while it was kind of odd to see the initial hook just drop by the wayside, the show already has enough really solid payoffs to make you forget. And as a fan of Broadway shows, Rogers the Musical is a wonderful homage to Broadway camp, but maybe don't make it your series post-credit scene, especially when you can either tease Echo and her upcoming series, or Kingpin, or Yelena, or even Jack and Eleanor. But outside of that, Hawkeye is wonderful, top-tier Disney Plus content, and a true delight. Coming in as my second favorite piece of MCU content this year is ShangChi. I'm consistently impressed with Marvel's ability to enter a genre and make a great MCU version of it. Space operas, political thrillers, heist movies, and now the martial arts film. And with ShangChi, we get some of the most engaging, fun hand-to-hand combat sequences we've ever seen in a Marvel movie, For me, it's better than Captain America and the Winter Soldier, and ranks up there with martial arts films like The Raid. The choreography is fluid, giving each character a specific fighting style to match their character. The set pieces are fun and dynamic. They feel like Jackie Chan films rather than cheap imitations. Tony Leung's Wenwu is so moving and captivating. Whether he's taking out armies, playing DDR with his wife, training a young ShangChi, or just sitting at a table making fun of Iron Man 3's Mandarin, the character draws you in and holds you there. It's intriguing but also tense, as you know what he can do when he snaps. The reintroduction of the Mandarin lore is handled really well, mockingly hand-waving away the Trevor Slattery version, but also including Trevor in the film to showcase the character's humor. It's both reverent to the MCU lore up until that point, but also respectful of the comic lore and the culture behind Shang-Chi. That's impressive. Simu Liu's Shang has glimmers of charm and charisma, but the plot seems to happen around him rather than Shang having any real agency. His best acting scenes are when he's just sitting and talking to other characters. I'm intrigued to see him play against other MCU characters because I think that's where he'll shine the most. My only gripe is that the kaiju battle at the end is good, but the smaller, more personal fights were so good that it feels like a step down. After watching Shang-Chi, I was smiling ear to ear, ready for the more mystic side of the MCU to erupt onto the scene. But before we go full mystic, we're going full multiverse, and that leads me to my favorite piece of MCU content this year, Spider-Man No Way Home. And again, spoilers. Holy hell, this film is a masterpiece. All of the complaints about the MCU Spider-Man, all of the complaints about the previous Sony Spider-Man, all of the worries about fan service for the sake of fan service, this script does them justice and gives each element a chance to shine. Spider-Man No Way Home is also just a remarkably efficient film too. A lot happens in only 2.5 hours, the exact same length of Infinity War, but it feels so brisk and short, almost like the best roller coaster rides. The acting, incredible. The visual effects, high caliber. The action set pieces, so much fun. The highlights here are Willem Dafoe, Tom Holland, and Andrew freaking Garfield. From the moment Garfield enters the movie, he's just perfect. He's funny, inquisitive, quippy, but knows how to make a serious scene pop with some incredible facial acting. Garfield is the driving force behind one of the only scenes of heroism in the MCU that makes me tear up. Not a sad scene, but a scene of true heroics and redemption. I really could just go on and on listing scenes that I love. Tom Holland's Spider-Man sensing something's off, only to realize that Norman has become the Goblin. The long takes as Peter Parker tries to hide in his apartment from the authorities. The many villains just bantering in their jails, making fun of Lizard's plan to turn all of New York into lizards. Doc Ock helping out in the final battle, not to overshadow his turn to good in Spider-Man 2. Tobey Maguire stopping Tom Holland from killing the Goblin and parenting Tom on what it means to truly be Spider-Man. The money shot of all three Spider-Man landing on the Statue of Liberty and swinging around cheering. All of these moments are weaved together with a really clever script, and even though it could be nitpicked to death the more you think about it, it does not diminish my enjoyment of this film one bit. It's one of those films like Endgame or Jurassic Park or Back to the Future where I just don't care about the plot holes because the ride that No Way Home takes you on is so imaginative, emotionally fulfilling, and spectacular. For me, No Way Home was the best way to end 2021 for the MCU. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And as always, if you like this video, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching.